Since we've got a predominantly female audience, and I think a millennial female audience predominantly, two interesting trend facts. Gentlemen, sorry, but in 2010, we officially and statistically moved into the female century. During the 2008-2009, what we now we've called the start of the Great Recession, all of the jobs that were culled in Europe and especially in America were from high-risk, male-dominated industries. And that culling resulted in January 27, it was the cover of the January Economist that actually said there are more female workers in the American workforce than there are male workers, and it was the single biggest generational shift to do that. So yes, we are in the female century. We're also in Women's Month in South Africa, so it's a really, really good topic to get onto that. And we've seen in terms of trends a lot of public transport initiatives, whether it's in Mexico, in Japan. There are female-only carriages on subways. There are taxis that are for women only. And it's an interesting topic. So I'm going to introduce the panel to you. We've got Bulelwa Koyana from SATC, Caroline Daniel from the Preferred Hotel Group, Robin Christie from Travelport, and I won't call you the thorn amongst the roses, Howard, but Howard Stevens. I've just been the chairman of Medicaid, but a great supporter of the travel industry, as well as discussing a lot of policy implementation, which is why we've allowed a male representative on the panel. So if we can just possibly just start with some opening statements from each of you, just from your own perspective, from your own companies. What is there that shift towards that female century, towards that female traveller? What are the touch points or key points from your perspective?
Thank you, Dion. Good morning, everyone. Firstly, there is no doubt that the demographics are changing, as much as we are in the female century, but I would want to think that though, when it comes to actual travelers, it's still very male-dominated. And hence, there is certainly a need for a paradigm shift to take place, whereby you are finding that there has to be sensitivity in terms of both the TMCs, in terms of the buyers, in terms of the suppliers, with regards to the needs of women, because women are still evolving in as far as travel is concerned, and especially being a traveler, more so being in a state of being assertive to say what they need and what they want. It is still something that you don't necessarily get. And hence, there is that shift now to begin to make it happen.
Before we go on, can you clarify what those needs and wants would be?
For example, when talking to quite a number of women, they say that they always would prefer to sit next to a woman than to sit next to a man, especially on long-haul travel. And equally with their children as well, when they're traveling, especially unaccompanied, they want that sense of comfort. Now, you do not necessarily have that at a supplier level, whereby there is just that immediate. There's a need of sanitary towels, and you find that other airlines have them, but others still do not have them. So there is still a voice that needs to be heard when it comes to that. The demographics are changing. Women are becoming the travelers, and therefore they need to be accommodated differently. And that paradigm shift has still not taken place.
Okay. I'm going to move to ask Caroline, from a hotel perspective and hospitality perspective, what are the shifts and changes there?
I think in terms of, from a hospitality point of view, and myself, I travel 3 out of 4 weeks a month, is that if I look at a plane, in fact, I fly into Africa with our loyal national carrier, SAA, majority of the time, is I look at the flights and the numbers on the plane, and I would say about 30% of that flight is females. So there is definitely a trend that is coming through from a hospitality point of view. From our hotel perspective, especially in West and East Africa, traveling into Africa isn't for sissies, whether you're male or female. But overall, we provide certain facilities and amenities for our female travelers, because we've definitely identified that there's an emerging market happening and taking place in the corporate space, which we've done a number of things, which I can go through later if you wish.
Sure. Robin?
So without being too controversial, I actually don't want to be treated any differently to the way a man is treated. So, and I'm going to rephrase that, because it's a bit like asking, what would you like? What would black women like? I just want what the white male traveller enjoys. So, as in mitigating risk from an organisation perspective, when I travel, I take care of myself. And I think women, we have a lot to do with our own, we carry a whole lot of guilt when we travel, because we are predominantly the caretaker at home. We're looking after all the kids. So when we get on a flight with our male colleague, he's worrying about how he's going to get the best deal out of the customer or wherever he's going to visit. We're worrying about how we're going to get the best deal. I mustn't forget to get the kids to get the school, the swimming pack and all the rest. Yeah, and I mustn't forget about so there is all of that goes on. I think the biggest thing that in mitigating risk, when I travel with male colleagues, they wear socks and flat shoes with lace-ups. If I had to do that, I'd be branded everything else. So I totter along in my stilettos on uneven pavements and just about break my neck, get to the meeting, sore feet, sweaty feet, panting, worrying about what the back of the heels look like. There's all sorts of things. Those are my issues. I don't know that anybody can do anything differently for it. As far as my security is concerned, and I think just in the brief it was, how can companies mitigate the risk for women who travel? If you want me to be at a meeting in Cape Town at 8 o'clock or at 9 o'clock the next morning, best you put me on the flight the day before. Accommodate me overnight, because I actually don't enjoy leaving home to be at the airport an hour before, so I have to leave home in the dark. I leave my home unattended. Anybody who may be watching knows that I've left home. So if that's the deal, then those are the considerations that I would look for more so.
Thank you, Robin. I was going to bring that up, but it is a very, very interesting one, because it deals with the whole thing about empowerment and equality. And yes, it is an interesting point for us to debate about whether you want to be treated differently, or are there realities, just gender realities that you need to do, or if you're possibly traveling to the Middle East or the Muslim country, are there those different things? So, Howard, I'm going to ask you to now jump in and give a male perspective, possibly.
Previously advantaged, now disadvantaged. I'm a panda, so that means I'm partly white and partly black. Generally, I was the author of the travel policy for Nedbank, and it had no sexism in it at all. But all of a sudden, our mission and our vision said we want to be the most admired bank in Africa, and by our staff. We said, well, we want to have valuing of our staff, and I have to look at differences of people, and there are differences between men and women, not the obvious ones. But they are, I think the employer looks at the duty of risk and said, if we are expecting our female staff to travel at 4 o'clock in the morning, and they were to be break down in their car, and something were to happen, it would be awful for the bank. It would be terrible. If a man were to break down, and it's not being sexist, there appears to be a better way that he could get out of it. So we actually started changing our policy. We're saying, if we have women traveling early in the morning, we would recommend that they travel in a shuttle, where somebody's driving them and there's more responsibility. Don't have to. It doesn't mean that because you're a woman you have to follow the rules, but we say it is open. Then I would speak to our women travellers and say, what are issues for you? And they say, you say we have to eat in the dining room to have food. It's not very pleasant for us because we go down there on our own and we get approached, and with the men, I think they wouldn't mind if a few girls were to sort of perv them, but with women, it's not nice. So we actually changed our policy. We said, you can have your meal in your room if you'd like to. It was never allowed before. So we would look and understand what's going on and understand the whole travel field, saying, how does it affect a woman? And the risk that they perceive they would have. We never told them what they had to do. But it was actually saying we will have an alternative. We understand that we are different. From Venus and from Mars, we are different, and there can be different travel needs.
All right, because then it then starts boiling down to a case of, well, supply and demand. Is if there are female travelers that are asking for specific services, rather than, is it a push or a pull thing? So are suppliers coming out with a lot more diverse services, so that if it is that specific shuttle, if it is a specific taxi service or something that is geared to women. So, Bulelwa, are suppliers coming to the party, and is that demand creating that possibly niche industry of specialized services?
I believe it's going to get there, but it's going to be coming from the demand, as you say. The suppliers will always have to respond to the demand because it is best for their business as well. However, if that voice is not said, then obviously they will definitely not. But there's no doubt now we're beginning, and especially that high jobs are now being targeted for women. Therefore, there is no doubt that there's going to be quite a bigger share of wallet that is going to be beginning to be coming from women. And suppliers are going to be responding to that.
Okay. Again, Caroline, from a hospitality point of view, is that supply chain being tweaked? Is there resonance there?
There's a number of things that we are doing, especially in our properties in East Africa, for example, where we have allocated and designated as single lady traveller floors, so we call them the club floors now, where they have a dedicated, not necessarily security guard, but more of a custodian, a keeper, reception area at the front of that, at the foot of that corridor. Then, of course, we have communal tables in the restaurant, which we do encourage our single lady travellers to make use of, which they do. We also do so the same in the bar in terms of different areas which are allocated, and they do feel comfortable and they do make use of them. So you can see in terms of a lot of these ladies are traveling without companions. They're traveling on their own. They are solo travelers. They don't necessarily, if I myself traveled with a male companion, I would feel a lot more comfortable, especially sitting on a plane, for example. But a lot of them are solo travelers, and they do, although there are threats and safety and security issues, we do try and accommodate them as much as possible. In terms of what I can add, in terms of, and in fact it was mentioned earlier, is from a global RFP point of view. In the past, especially from a corporate point of view, is that the travel policy never really dictated or never really mentioned, as in terms of from a Nedbank point of view, lady travellers or safety and security measures. It is now becoming more predominant. I can see it with this up-and-coming RFP season, where it is now becoming essential that they know exactly how their travellers are being treated, and solo travellers as well as lady travellers. So that's also something that has changed in the market. Is
there an age demographic, or is it just generally a gender demographic that we're talking about? Or are there subtleties within a female traveller demographic? Is it age dependent or?
No, not necessarily, not at all. If I look at the average age right now from South Africa, I would say in the range of 30 to 45, 50 years old, but in the rest of the world, no. In fact, I actually had a very interesting call. A client of mine from Germany was traveling to Luanda. And in their travel policy is that they need to know the name and have a photograph of their driver. So that's quite interesting how that's changed.
So a company like Uber would be a great help for that because of those kind of securities and especially what happened in India after putting a panic button and being able to track the trip and able to share it with 5 people, family or friends, so that you can actually track that trip. So Robin, just in terms of that, then what I'm asking is are there, is a company like Travelport looking at those kinds of new technologies that are being added into the mix, of the travel, and are the travellers being made aware of those kind of services? And as we're going with new technologies, it just seems to be able to, especially with your ubiquitous smartphone, you being able to be geotagged all the time, all of those kind of things. Are new technologies being used for
absolutely,
this?
Absolutely. And you're right. It's all about the mobile, the applications that are available on your mobile phone. And I think the big move for corporates to actually allow access to those applications and synergize them, make sure that they form part of your corporate policy. a couple of things that do need, when I travel, I don't want to sit in the middle seat, no matter what happens. So, and I'm sometimes reliant on the TMC to make that choice for me. But I also want to be in control of that. So, from that perspective, you can, online bookings and doing it myself is perhaps more of what I'm really wanting to, because then I can take care of my personal security when I get on the flight. The other thing is what do you call it, the international rescue and home, don't want to mention any particular brand name, which is all I can think of. But certainly, there are certainly emergency plans available. Now, I'm very comfortable that when a bomb goes off in a certain country and I'm visiting a remote area of it, I get advised beforehand, it may not be, most of the time when I'm going to Cape Town, they tell me about riots in Khayelitsha, which is I have to deal with as well. But for the most part, that's important for me. It really is important for me. And if perhaps not just for me, for the organization I work for, that they can actually monitor and keep a record of what is going on. So I think from a mobile perspective, having the dialogue with your passenger and with your traveler all the time is critical. It really is.
You mentioned just before I come back to Howard, just that there are certain obviously differences in being a mother as well and being there. So possibly to both of you, is there specific attention paid to the hotel really has to have good Wi-Fi, so you can Skype, you can do that, you can have that constant connectivity, because what I'm starting to feel, especially in the trends area, is that all of those sort of ancillary services are becoming more and more important. They're not just add-ons, they're actually part of the whole thing. And don't get me started on hotels that charge for Wi-Fi.
No,
but anyway,
absolutely.
let's go.
And you've just got me started, so I can't hold back. I don't believe that Wi-Fi should be accessible to everybody, and globally it is. I think in some countries we really are getting the raw end of the deal with some of the costs involved, and it forms for me part of the deal. I come to your hotel, I enjoy your bed. If you want to build in the price of it or whatever, that's your problem. But don't then give me an added extra, telling me I'm going to pay $100 or 100 Rand for 20 minutes on your Wi-Fi at certain times. I need it when I need it and how I need it. So absolutely, it is critical.
Can I just comment on
yes,
that
sure.
side? We find that there are real preferences for known brands, particularly in hotels. The B&Bs are not doing so well with our female travellers because they like to have the Wi-Fi. They like to have, that sounds awful, but I'm just saying, women like to have the Wi-Fi so they can contact the kids. They like to have a shopping centre close by, or entertainment, or reasonable restaurants. It's more than just I'm going to sleep and work and whatever. It's more of those things there. Sometimes we're finding there gym access as well. There's people saying they want to look after their health. Being much of in the healthcare world, I know that people do take it seriously and want to have those facilities or the ability to be in an area where they can exercise it. Room service, we say, some ladies would like to have the food in their room, but there is other little things that are major risks when you're the travel manager. If there's no bath and the person is a bath person, or the hairdryer is one of these little mini things there, it's really a risk to your travel policy because they never want to travel again. So you do have to be careful of those. Joking aside, but generally the risks we worry about are safety and security. So the big hotels would have the cameras and a visible presence of security, because I think that in our world of women travellers, that's probably one of the biggest things is, am I safe? Mm-hmm. And so we actually would look at that. And so we wouldn't want to encourage people to go to somewhere that the bank thinks would be great, rather than they think they're safe. So it does change your policy there. Generally, though, we're finding, when I speak to the travel people and particularly our travel management companies, they're saying very little difference between men and women, the requirements going across. It's not major differences there. Probably more safety than anything else.
I'd just like to ask the panel, because it's also an interest of mine, just with the, Robin, as you're saying, with the recent bombing in Thailand, the threats of ISIS, there's just a whole lot of new threats around. So even if it's not just female specific, what are the the hot spots, say, around the globe where you are finding that there are special services or needs required that you as a travel industry, that you have to focus on and make sure that everything really is seamless? Are there those hotspots, and what are the developments? Whatever.
I don't necessarily believe that they've already been designed to say these are the hotspots that are women specific, but I see that beginning to take place now. I mean, we currently are very uncomfortable with regards to the whole Department of Home Affairs and the human trafficking, and that is actually something that is beginning to draw the attention on what is truly happening when it comes to especially young girls and women. So I do believe that there is just a change that is beginning to take place, and it's just a matter of time when those hotspots will be quite visible and extremely created, and we are getting there. But I do not believe that we are there yet. And especially, what's interesting, I mean, we're citing that possibly about 30% that are women travelers, but what you're finding is women are very much trying to adapt to the male. Yes, we say we do not want to be treated differently to the male. Our point of reference has been to the male, whereas we are going to beginning to see a shift where it's woman and it's woman. And maybe it will actually get to be the other way around, where the male now will be beginning to look in terms of what has been specifically designed for women.
Okay. Any other hotspots?
Can I say that, yeah? We have a lot of research on international travel. We don't go into many of the hotspots. We did have a lot of investigation when Ebola was rife in West Africa, because we do have a lot of business there. But we do have other areas of the bank. We have sister companies who would know the situation on the ground there as well. So we take advice from there as well. As we're talking about, Khayelitsha is not in the middle of Cape Town. It's outside of there. But we have local issues. In the last year, we had a possible uprising in Lesotho. And one of our women travelers, we advised her not to go there at that time there, to lead it until it's settled down. So it can be on your doorstep. But you're never far away from anything in the world. As long as we would actually try and say our rule and our policy is when people are traveling, particularly internationally, they should be close enough to where they're going to the venue. We don't want them traveling across a major town. So if they have an event in London, we'd say we want them to be, if it's in the city, we want the hotel to be close to the city. Unless they're aware of they've been there in their travel wise and could go anywhere. But generally we're saying that would be a policy that we're trying to have there. And we do use experts to give us that type of information to say where are our travellers at risk.
Okay.
I think the other thing too, just on that, is that a bomb could go off anyway. In the environment we're sitting in right now, it could happen anyway. But obviously there are key hotspots. I in fact had a LRA who do our hotel site inspections. They're refusing to travel to Kenya. I've just returned from Kenya, and it's a case of, but it is an American company. So in terms of that, that's my opinion on that. And my colleagues around the rest of the world, in fact, I actually had this conversation on Monday with a couple of colleagues from America, South America, Europe, where they just think that Africa is dark, deepest Africa with everything that is happening, because the media blow everything out of proportion. So again, I think in terms of that, they're using that as a guide. My other point would be research where you're traveling to, where your hotel is located. If there are hotspots where there are incidents that have happened, it will be, if you had to Google it, it will be in the media. And I think get as much information as possible from a traveler's point of view, so that you're not at risk and that you don't travel past a Khayelitsha or land up in Khayelitsha at 9 o'clock at night in a vehicle on your own and you have no idea where you're going and you're trying to use your GPS or your phone as a GPS. I would say that hotspot-wise, it would be quite difficult to pinpoint right now.
Robin, any advisories that you give to your clients?
Again, just as far as context is concerned, I mean, 60% of the travel that happens in South Africa is domestic. So to your point of saying, you know, make sure that everybody who hires a car is automatically equipped with a Garmin. When I travel in Johannesburg, I drive a luxury German sedan, as do most of us. I then go to Cape Town and I'm driving a 1.3 Atos with one airbag. is my life of any more value in Joburg than it is in Cape Town, particularly when I'm not familiar with the roads? So that sort of that kind of thought into into corporate policy is important. Again, there's data, and we manage our mobile spend and our communication spend. But if you're using your mobile phone to find your way to your next appointment, obviously there's a cost involved. So it's cheaper to actually equip all the cars with Garmin as far as that's concerned. I think, and I do believe that in the South African market, for the most part, the global travel that does take place, I think is really well cared for. There may be some of the smaller, medium enterprises don't necessarily have the same sort of a business corporate policy as do companies like Nedbank. But for the most part, I think international travel is well taken care of. You have sort of pickup points, and there are quite a lot of support services available to you. But domestically, it's equally, I'm away from home, and my life is just as disrupted.
Howard, just maybe I'm not sure if you can answer the question, but from a corporate point of view, if I'm saying that all of these ancillary services like Garmin's or and GPSs and things that you need to stay connected would probably be pushed off the budget list and saying, well, you can't do this. Is it on a corporate level being considered as part of essentials that you need to travel with now?
I can comment on that. I was going to speak on it, but I'm glad it was brought up earlier, is that we did see a trend of people asking for sort of a tracking advice or GPS type of equipment, not on their cell phone. We saw people asking for automatic cars. And I think we'll be talking later on data. When you start seeing this, you say, why is it happening? And it is because of robots that are out and big traffic works and congestion and everything there. And people are saying, I haven't got enough time to do everything out there. And it's not just women. This was actually saying it was a trend. And we said, we as a corporate have to actually change our whole policy to allow this, because that's the new way things are. We do have load shedding. You can't be looking for a robot that's out or whatever and going to the wrong spaces. So definitely it would be built in as changing times come across there. But then we don't want to have kiddie seats in the cars there. We don't want to have a tow bar when you're just going on a business trip. In fact, I've gone up to a general manager and said to him, there's problems in Cape Town because I see that you're hiring a 4x4 to go from the airport into Cape Town Central. The last time the roads were pretty good. And it happened to be in a budget speech, and they didn't get the budget increase they wanted because they're wasting money. But you need to use that data to give you good information about what's happening. And you need to get the feedback, getting back to women and saying, do they feel at risk? And if they do, can we do anything, change a policy to fit in?
So if there's, if there are new apps like Uber, which have that tracking, it's kind of an all-in-one. Would policies change to rather have that as a company expense rather than hiring a car?
I can say Uber, I know, are probably in the room today there. We haven't really got the corporate sense with Uber at the moment in time. We have other preferred suppliers to us, and there's a good fit. It's like Sapphire. Hasn't got a corporate look at the moment in time, so it goes outside of our radar. But I like things that Uber do. Like having the photograph there is really good for our female staff. So they say at the moment they say a car will arrive. It will be branded with this branding on it. The driver's name will probably be this. This is the registration will probably be. But there could be a change. There could be a crash on the way to there, or it could be swapped out for a reason. But I like the idea of using the Uber technology to send a photograph of the driver and say this is the person who's coming. So yes, there is, and maybe in the future we will do those corporate deals. We do have suppliers at the moment in time, so sometimes we find things that fit into the ordinary private world there versus the corporate world, and sometimes there's ones that match across there.
Dion, if I could just say something
yes,
as well,
sure.
and it really does bring to the Uber and the shuttle services. It's no matter if you know the face and you've got a picture and you can track your distance, who's tracking it? So if my family, I'm landing at 12 o'clock in the evening or even 8 o'clock in the evening, and are they it puts the onus on them. I don't have a husband, I don't have children. My 84-year-old mother doesn't really get it. But so from a shuttle service perspective, if I got a call when I got home or as I arrived home from somebody at a head office saying, hi, Mr. just to check, have you landed, are you back home safely? That for me is perhaps a secure. The photograph and his name is great, but who's going to check? He could drop me off in London Road. And I did have an experience where late at night we came home and he took the London Road turn-off. And it was late and he said, no, don't worry, it's fine. I'm a white woman sitting in the back of a car, clearly looking like I'm not part of the system there. And it was a little bit unsettling. We got through fine. It was okay. But who says I couldn't have been dropped off somewhere? You know, that isn't important.
Okay. Anyone else from the panel to add to that?
There are cost implications because, for example, I do know that a point-to-point does become more expensive, but it's going to be necessary to know that because of the changing now from a demographics of travelers, that those costs have got to be part of a consideration, and therefore the whole issue of sometimes budget cutting, it doesn't necessarily mean there has just to be that voice that speaks to the fact that it doesn't mean that it must impact on the safety of women.
I want to just swing, we've just got a little bit of time left, the conversation around to a slightly different tack. Is one of the things that we research is the importance of female millennials. This demographic has, out of all female generations in the world, have more access to education, opportunities, jobs, and everything. So it's a very, very significant one. One of the findings from this was, and I think it's going to impact the travel industry, is that 80–90% of millennial females would like to re-enter the workforce after having children, compared to the previous generation who wanted to have it all. Female millennials would rather try it all and then make decisions based on that. So there's a subtle difference. One of the interesting things is for female millennials is that the whole mentor and protege. They said the best mentors are those to whom they can receive advice, but also dispense advice back together. So it's a more of a leveled playing field. So I want to put to the panel there is, do you get feedback from the female staff that you work for and the female people in the industry to start shifting policies and changing things? It's that old paradigm of possibly a male manager deciding on something that is there, or something that's not part of that, whether it's the industry, that group, that demographic. But are the companies receptive to getting that feedback from a younger female millennial on how they want to travel and the future of travel? Any thoughts on that?
I think you have to be modern to actually keep up to date with what's ever going on. So even though I'm retired, I keep up and seeing what is actually happening out there. What are the trends happening out there? It's really exciting. You actually have more time to look at it there. So in the bank and in anybody I've worked with, I'll ask, what are the issues that are driving you, and try to understand those female millennials and say, well, you've got all those responsibilities, you want to be in the working environment, how can we help you? And sometimes it may mean you don't need to travel, is that you would actually get into a video conference instead. And we say, do you physically have to be there? Do you have to look in somebody's eyes and say, well, that's what's going on, or could you see them over video conference? And those things there will change the way we travel. It's not always good for the travel industry, but it says that it may not work because multitasking for a woman is I can't sing and chew gum at the same time. It's impossible. But a woman can do so many things and balance this and whatever. It has to change.
Robin, you were about to say something?
Yeah, I'm on the receiving end of a corporate travel policy. I work for a global company, and they tell me whether you don't have to like it. This is it. And it, for the most part, it's pretty okay. I certainly don't think we have any jarring issues in it that I couldn't resolve locally. However, I do believe, just being in the travel industry and working in this dynamic, I do believe that more feedback groups should be created within organizations. You often don't have the opportunity to give that feedback. Certainly the mentor approach it works, it's proven, it's one of the most sophisticated ways of educating and getting buy-in, because we can tell them, as you can tell me as much as you want to what's good for me. I'll tell you what's good for me, actually. And so you're setting up those, almost formalizing it a little bit, and setting up feedback forums where you can actually give input on, and creating the dynamic and creating the questions. It is important. It really is.
And the reason why I brought it up is, in our millennial studies, when we look at it as a workforce as well, if you look at the social media environment, if one person can tweet a company and basically bring that reputation down, why in a work situation are you not allowed to have your voice heard? So it's a complete disjoint of what's happening not in a pop culture space, but in a sort of a generic space technologically, and then you come into a corporate environment, and then suddenly all of those voices are stunted, and especially a young workforce can't understand. I'm allowed to give my opinion to a brand in cyberspace where everybody hears it, but I can't contribute to the company culture.
John, interestingly, about 3 weeks ago, I was at UCT invited by students to come and talk to them about entering the workplace.
Yeah.
And female students were very much concerned because they are appreciating the fact that there is a different corporate culture out there, which is different from what they are accustomed to in terms of being able to tweet and talk as however. So, in essence, the rigidity and the resistance to change is still going to continue to be prevalent because there is that degree of adapting that takes place once you enter the workplace, where you understand that there are rules that are written and there are those that are not written. However, that is still going to change.
Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think as companies evolve and their brands evolve and the world's evolving, travel's also clearly evolving. I think that companies need to be more flexible, that they do need to take into account that their travellers and their staff members are travelling and they're sacrificing, and they've got to take into account that besides the fact that they're sacrificing family life or loved ones or whatever, a gala or a ballet or a play, is that I'm talking about females and males in general, is that they need to actually come to the party where they should welcome feedback and be more flexible, because that is our world right now. The dynamics are changing. We're evolving every day, and so is travel and technology. So I definitely think that there would be a case of being more flexible and setting up forums and overall, absolutely.
Well, just on that point, it's a really interesting one because last year my company did a lot of research in the space of digital burnout and digital addiction. It's a very, very new space, and the report ended off is specifically on what you've been saying then and what Robin said at the start. Look up, if you want to Google her, Melissa Mayer. She's the CEO of Yahoo. She was with Google. She was talking about a different kind of burnout, and she said, for companies, and I think it's relevant here to bring this conversation, especially into about mitigating risks of travel. It's not a physical threat, but it's a empathetic factor that you need to throw into that. She said if people are working and they're working long hours and they love their job, there's not a problem. But she started coming across people that were just not firing on all pistons. And one of them was a case study. It was a female worker who was in quite high management. We'll call her Katie, and she sat her down and said, "Katie, what is wrong?" And she said, you normally love your job, you're working really well, but something is bothering you and it's starting to affect the organization. And so this Katie said, I have to attend a PTA meeting every week, and I've got to be there at a certain time, and the meetings run late. She was at Google at that stage. And she says, I'm always the last mommy to get to that meeting. And she says what kills her was the building resentment was seeing her daughter look at her as she walked into the room saying, "You're the last mommy again." And that's why I brought up, and when we talked about the access to Wi-Fi and all of those kind of ancillary things, and Melissa said, well, it's really easy to do that. We'll just kill the resentment. At this time, you leave the office. And the first time they did it, they were, again, that was the co-founder of Google was in mid-sentence, and she said, stop. Katie's got to leave. And he said, well, we're 10 minutes away from finishing the meeting, and we all know 10 minutes is not the way you finish. It's going to drag on for long. And she said, no. Katie has to leave now. Katie, pack your bags and leave immediately. she did that, and all that resentment suddenly evaporated. And so what I'm trying to leave you with here, because we're running out of time and going into a group discussion, is about, especially for a female traveller, it's perhaps, yes, absolutely the security, the kind of traditional things you think about, but because if you're tracking trends about female millennials coming to the workforce, the prevalence, the female century, all of those kind of things, I do think we're saying that, you know, possibly in terms of that glass ceiling, females don't want to be treated differently, but there are fundamental issues that need to be addressed, and they're possibly softer issues, but those softer issues are actually hard issues, and they are deal breakers.